Hello friends, welcome to our channel Explain Things Around and our course Learn C Programming A to Z. So today we'll learn about arrays in detail. So before we start, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please click on the subscribe button. So far we have learned about primary data types available in C, like char, int, float, double, and how we perform various operations on top of those. How do we create loops? How do we create functions? How do we create conditional operations around those? So today we'll learn about arrays. So far, if you have noticed, all of those data types are available to store only single value of that particular data type. For example, if it is character, if we are defining a character variable that can store only one character at a moment, for example c, x, 1, 2, z, anything. Similarly, if we are defining an integer variable that also can store only one number at a given time, like 10, 0, 20, anything. But in real scenarios, most of the time we come across a situation where we need to store values, multiple values or multiple instance of a given variable. Let's take an example. Let's say you are creating a variable marks, or say marks in mathematics. You might have to store, suppose if you are having 20 students in your class, you'll be willing to store all of those 20 numbers, all of those 20 values in the variable, say marks in the mathematics. You won't be willing to create 20 variables to store marks of 20 students. That won't be a appropriate way to handle the situation, right? You will not feel comfortable if you have this kind of restrictions in your program. By the language you are working, if you have that kind of restrictions, it will become very hectic to write a code. So whenever we come across such a situation where we need to store multiple values, or you can say values of different instance for a given variable, you can go for the array. So array is nothing, basically collection of values of similar data type. So one constraint here is the values which you are going to store, all of those would be of similar data type. So today we'll learn how can we create array, how do we initialize it, the way we initialize our other primary variables like char, int, float. We learned how to initialize that, how do we declare those variables, how do we assign values to those, how do we pass it to function, how do we retrieve the values. All those things we'll learn with respect to arrays also, and we'll see how array is stored in the memory. So here are few basic syntax about arrays. So we'll get into programming. I'll show you also how do we declare or how do we write all those statements. So if you see here, if you are comfortable with our primary data types, array will not be difficult for you. You will see few changes here and there, like for as we say, we can store multiple values for the variable. So let's say marks, and you are storing marks of 10 students. So how will you handle, how will you retrieve all those? So definitely you need somewhere you where you can define the size, and if you need some index by which you can retrieve the mark of a given student, right? So that is the reason we need to follow some particular syntax. Let me show you something in Excel. Okay, so that might make it more clear for you. So suppose you are creating a variable, and you want to store marks of number of students in the same variable. So few things you have to define in start itself. One thing, for how many students you are going to store the marks, that needs to be definite. It is not going to change on the runtime. So we have few restrictions on the array, so these are few. So like the size of that array you have to define in the starting itself. Okay, the way you are defining that can change, like when you are declaring it, that time itself you are defining, or you are defining the size by providing the values, those things can change. But this is the restrictions. When you are declaring your array, you must have to tell the size of that array. Similarly, now let's see, if you are planning to store marks of 10 students, and suppose you have given the marks in this way: 75, 80, 65, 95, 99, 40, one guy was absent, suppose for example, and similarly 12. Okay, so how many are these? 8. Let's take two more. 20, let's say 85 and 90. So we have the marks of the 10 students. Okay, but if you are working, if you are creating a program around it, definitely you will need to access these values at a given time. So suppose for example, if you need to get the value of first student or say fourth student, how will you get that? Definitely you need some index here, right? So for that reason, we associate index with the array name so that we know which particular value we are referring to. So when you say mark 2, system will know you are talking about 65. Okay, so one thing to notice here, even the number is starting from 1 to 3, index starts from 0. So this thing you have to remember. So if you need to access the first element, you have to say index 0. If you need to access the sixth element, you have to say the index 5. So when you say mark 2, you get the third element. When you say mark 7, you get the eighth element. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So this is how you retrieve the value. Okay, so first part, declaring. So if you want to declare, you can declare it by giving the size at the same time. Okay, this is how you can declare it. If you need to map the values, you can do in this way also. At the same time, you can map these all these values, 75, 80, all these values you can map it by passing in the braces. So we are clear here. So let me show you here the syntaxes. So first statement, you see int mark 10. So this is your array declaration, you are defining the size. The way similarly, if you need to access a value, I said you have to give the index. So here if you are saying mark 5, that means you are going to access the sixth element of the marks array. If you need to print that, if you can simply pass that value in your printf statement. If you see the fourth line, int num4 2461, here when you are declaring the variable, when you are declaring the array variable, same time you are assigning the value also. So this is also one way of assigning the array values. Okay, so this is your one dimensional array. So when we are talking about array, it can be of multiple dimension based on the requirement. So if you see this all, these all are your first one dimensional array. But if you see this example, int a 42, this is your two dimensional array. So it says this array can have four rows, have each having two columns. Okay, so this kind of storage also you can provide with the help of array. So let's get into dev C++ and we'll write few program around it. So you will understand how do we declare variable, how do we access these, how do we uh, assign values to these array variables. Let's create a new source file. I'll name it as array demo. Array demo program. Source file type will be C. Yeah, so we'll start with hash include studio.h void main. So if you need to declare a array variable, you can say it as array int marks. If your type will be here also same as we followed for the primary data type. So if your array variable is going to store data of integer type, you will say int. If it is going to store data of character type, you will say char. So here we are planning to store integer marks. So we are saying int marks, and let's say we are going to store marks of 5 students. So this is your declaration part. This is done. Okay. Now if you want to get the values, assign values to these 5 for these 5 students. Okay. So you can prompt for that to user. Let's say that printf. Okay. And percentage d comma, sorry, let's say enter the students students marks. Okay, now you can call your scanf function. So here we'll say percentage d, and the way we are saying there ampersand variable name, right? So here that marks is having 5 elements, so for each of those elements you have to call this function, right? So what do you think would be the best approach to do it? Will you write it 5 times with all 5 indexes? Do you think this will be the better way to write? No, right? So what we can do, we can put this in loop. We have learned about loop concept. So we can put this in loop. We know the size of this array. So we can create a counter variable, let's say I, and we can initialize that from 0 since the index start from 0, and will continue till the last element, so less than 5 and I plus plus, and what will call this function, and here index will be I. So in this way we'll get all of these, will assign values to all the elements of the array marks. So let's compile it. You'll see no error. Now let's, no error, no warning, yeah. So let's run this program. So you'll notice you'll be given prompt 5 times to enter the marks. First, let's say 86. See, you again got the prompt 95. You again got the prompt 90, 85. So this is the fifth. Now your program came out. So this is how you can assign the values. Similar way, if you need to access any particular value, you can use the printf function. So let's say you want to see the mark of fourth student. Fourth student's mark is, so fourth student, right? So what will be the index? It will be 3. Since mark starts from the index starts from the 0 element. Let's compile and execute it. So we are saying 76, 86, 90, 95, 85. So we entered the marks for 5 students. Now if you see here, fourth student's mark is 76. Oh, my bad. I put 0 here. It should have been 3. Okay. So if you compile and run it again, let's say 90, 95, 85, 94, 88. So you see fourth student's mark 94. This fourth element you are getting. So this is how you can retrieve the value. Let's say if you want to get the total of this mark, total of all of this mark, we can put that, all of these we can put in the loop, and we'll say sum equal to sum plus that particular value I, right? And let's declare this variable sum on top and initialize it to 0. Now we can print the value in stored in the sum. We can say printf total marks is percentage d comma sum. So now this time you can take this scenario as a marks of a single student in different subjects. You can assume it like that. So we are entering the mark of a single student for 5 different subjects, and we want to see the total marks gained by that student. So if you say here, let's say 19 English, 95 in math, 18 suppose social science, similarly other subjects. So you will see the total mark is 451. You got the total here. So forget about the new line character and all. So that we can enter here. If you see say here slash n, you will know. And again, you can, if you are planning to use this as a project and you are planning to use this array to get the mark of 5 students, you can five single student 5 subjects, you can design it like that. So you will know first element is subject for subject 1, second element is for subject 2, third element is for subject 3, fourth element is marks obtained in subject 4, and this is for subject 5. So this way you can store marks of a single student in and in for 5 different subjects. So if you notice here, this is equivalent to your one-dimensional array. If you see here in the Excel also, this all is coming in the single dimension. But if you extend the same example, and rather than assuming these marks, let's separate it out. So let's assume these 5 marks, which was this uh, 1 2 3 4 5, these 5 marks, subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, subject 4, and subject 5. So these 5 marks are for student 1. If you want to extend it to number of students, let's say for 4 students, then this will become your two-dimensional array. So this is how we are going to extend our program, and we'll understand multidimensionality of our array. So if you want to store the marks of multiple students with the help of array, okay, this is how you can do. Let's extend it. So in this way you will be able to store this kind of a structure where you can enter the marks for multiple students in all of those 5 subjects. So if you need to store this kind of data, then your array, let's say, then your array will become student, let's say student marks detail. Let's say you are creating this, so it will become of size 4 by 5, right? You are storing marks for 4 students in 5 subjects, then it will become your two-dimensional array or multi-dimensional array. So let me show you how you can create it. So far you can assume this was for single student. Now let's extend it to 3 students only, not more. Okay, so we can see enter the students. So what we'll do, we'll prompt for for each student separately. So we'll say first enter the student 1, first student's mark, then we'll say for second student's mark, then we similarly will prompt. Okay, so this time you'll need 3 loops, right? One for the students and another for the marks. So let's add one more counter here, int I, int j. So I, okay, this will use for this one, you will use for student, okay, and this one we will use for subject. So So I'll start from I equal to, again counter will start, index will start from 0 only. So I equal to 0 and less than 3. We know for 3 student only we are planning. And I plus plus. Let's put all this in loop. Scanf part, let's put this in loop. So what we'll say, printf, enter the student number. Let's say student number. For which student? That student number will get from the variable, from the counter I. So here it will print, enter the student number once mark. Let's say here once mark. Then inside that we will have the counter for subject wise, and this will get stored too. So here also we have to put the subscript I and j both. So this way we will be able to store marks for each student in each of the subject. Let's say, let's print the student wise total also now. So say again we'll have this loop, right? So we'll have one loop for the student, for which student we are planning to put it, right? And next loop will be for to calculate the marks. So this way, for the first student, it will get the marks in all of the 5 subject. It will total that, then it will print. So let's say here for which student we are putting total marks of student number percentage d is percentage d, and here we'll map I comma sum. One thing to notice, this sum count variable should get initialized after each print. Otherwise it will show you the, it will add to the previous value. Suppose first student got total of 540 marks, that value will get added up to the next student's mark also if you don't reinitialize this variable sum. Okay, so let's see how it works. So we'll compile it, no error. Let's run it now, and before I run, let's see if we are using proper new line character or not. Otherwise output will not look good. Yeah, so we are good. So let's run it now. Enter the student number zeros marks. So we are use, so one thing you can notice, in real scenario there won't be student number 0, it will start from the 1, right? You will have first element, second, you will have first student, second student, third student. But since we have mapped the index our counter variable itself in the print statement, that's why it is printing the index number. Enter the student number zeros mark, it will come once mark. But if you wanted to change it, rather than mapping I, we could have mapped I plus 1, so that it makes more sense. So let's do that. Okay, so what I'll do here, I'll say I plus 1. I'll compile and run. So now you see, enter the student once mark. So I'll say first subject mark is 90, second subject 95, then 90, then again 85. Let's say again 88. So this is, that all was your first student's mark. Then we can store the second student's mark. Let's say 95, 90, 86, 88, 98. Then let's say enter the student 3 mark. We can say 55, 66. Let's say he was absent in one subject, let's say 0, then 90, then say 89. So we are able to store here the marks of 3 different students, and if you see in last we can even print the total of the students mark. So array is a very, so you can understand here, array is a very important concept and very helpful for programmers. If you need to create an app, or if you need to create a software, just for taking the example of this only, if you want to create a software for class teacher, for some college administrator, where they can maintain the database of students, and they can create a report, they can show a report, how was the students progress, you can easily achieve that with the help of array. So you can similarly create a two-dimensional array. You can store the marks of those subjects, and you can even see the percentage of this subject. And if you need to show who is the topper of that batch, all those things you can easily achieve. If you see here, we have the sum 448, 457, 300. If you need to just tell who is the topper out of these three students, you can easily identify 457. So for that also we have learned with the help of loops, with the help of if else statements, how can we compare these numbers and come up with the solution, who is the topper of this batch. So I hope you like this video and you are clear with the concepts of array. If you have any doubt, feel free to put that in comment box. But and don't forget to subscribe our channel. Thank you. Thanks for watching.